It was all captured on CCTV, how he made attempt to escape from gunmen. Unfortunately, he lost the battle.
All we know is that he was tagged, he was doing the car, cleaning the car out, and somebody came through shooting and killed him and the baby. He was a good kid, y'all. He was. He didn't bother nobody. He didn't. Him and that baby.
It was a Monday morning like any other in Forest Hill, Texas. The sun had just begun to warm the pavement as parents rushed their children to school and workers headed to their jobs. At Slappy's Express Car Wash, customers lined up for a quick cleaning before starting their week. Among them was 30-year-old rapper Ronnie Smith, known to fans as G Lil Ronnie, and his daughter Ramani, who sat quietly in the back seat, perhaps still glowing from her birthday celebration just 24 hours earlier. Romani had turned 5 years old the previous day. 5, an age of wonder and discovery, an age where the world is still magical and full of possibilities. Her father had likely made her day special. Cake, presents, laughter and love. Neither of them could have known that their visit to a car wash would be their final moments together. At approximately 10:45 a.m. on March 3, 2025, a white 4-door Kia pulled into the car wash parking lot. 2 men emerged from the vehicle, approached Ronnie's car and without warning, opened fire. In broad daylight, with witnesses all around, a father and his innocent 5-year-old daughter were gunned down in an act of violence so shocking that it left an entire community reeling. This wasn't a random act. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was a calculated attack that took the lives of a man who was building his music career and his kindergarten-aged daughter who had her entire life ahead of her. Before we continue with this heartbreaking story, I want you to take a moment to consider how quickly ordinary moments can turn tragic. If this story moves you, please consider subscribing to our channel. We don't just tell these stories. We analyze them, learn from them, and provide insights that might help keep you and your loved ones safe. Because understanding the reality of crime isn't about fear, it's about awareness and prevention. Now, let's look deeper into the lives that were lost that morning and the ripple effects that continue to impact a community searching for answers and justice. Ronnie Smith wasn't just another statistic in America's ongoing struggle with gun violence. To those who knew him, he was a dedicated father, a passionate musician, and a man with dreams. In the Texas rap scene, G Lil Ronnie was making a name for himself, having released his album, Literally, in 2023, adding to a growing catalogue of music that showcased his talent and determination. Those close to Ronnie described him as family-oriented, someone who prioritized his relationships, especially with his daughter Ramani. Social media posts revealed countless moments between father and daughter. Ice cream outings, playground visits, and studio sessions where Ramani watched her father work. These weren't just photo opportunities. They were glimpses into a bond that was central to Ronnie's life. He was a good person who didn't bother anybody, Stella Houston, Ronnie's aunt, would later tell reporters through tears. He was focused on his music and taking care of his family. According to Houston, Ronnie wasn't involved in activities that would make him a target. He wasn't known to have enemies. He was simply a man trying to build a better life through his art and provide for his daughter. In the music world, G Lil Ronnie had collaborated with other artists in the Texas scene, including a notable track with Go Yayo called Hood Frame Killuminati back in 2018. While not yet a household name nationally, he was steadily building his reputation, one track at a time. His music reflected his experiences, his struggles, and his aspirations, an authentic voice from Forest Hill that resonated with listeners who connected with his storytelling. Ramani, at just 5 years old, was at the beginning of her journey. She had likely just started kindergarten, learning her letters and numbers, making friends, and discovering her own interests. Her birthday celebration the day before the tragedy would have been filled with the simple joys of childhood: cake, presents, friends, and the security of being surrounded by people who loved her. In family photos, her smile revealed a child who felt safe and cherished, particularly in the presence of her father. What makes this tragedy even more devastating is the future that was stolen. Not just from Ronnie, who at 30 had so much life ahead of him, but especially from Armani, who would never experience graduation, first love, career achievements, or any of life's milestones. 2 generations of potential, of dreams, of possibility, extinguished in seconds at a car wash on an ordinary Monday morning. March 3, 2025 began as an unremarkable Monday in Forest Hill, Texas. The weather was mild, typical for early spring in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. For Ronnie Smith, it may have been a day to catch up on errands after celebrating his daughter's birthday the previous day. A trip to the car wash, a mundane task on a to-do list, became the setting for an unthinkable tragedy. Slappy's Express Car Wash on Forest Hill Drive was busy with its usual Monday morning customers. Some were getting their vehicles cleaned after weekend trips, others preparing for the work week ahead. Security footage would later show Ronnie's car pulling into the facility around 10:30 a.m. Armani was secured in her seat, perhaps playing with a toy or watching something on a tablet, ordinary moments in a child's day. Witnesses later reported that Ronnie remained in his vehicle, waiting in line for his turn at the car wash. Nothing about his behavior suggested he was concerned or expecting trouble. He and Ronnie were simply going about their day, a father and daughter spending time together on an ordinary morning. At approximately 10:45 a.m., a white 4-door Kia entered the car wash parking lot. The vehicle circled once, as if the occupants were surveying the area. Then it parked several spaces away from Ronnie's car. 2 men emerged, later identified as 24-year-old Adonis Robinson and 21-year-old Jacobo Russell. What happened next occurred with a speed and brutality that left witnesses frozen in horror. The 2 men approached Ronnie's vehicle with determined strides. Without warning or confrontation, they drew weapons and opened fire. The sound of gunshots between 20 and 30, according to witness accounts, shattered the morning calm. Glass broke, metal punctured, and in seconds, the lives of a father and his 5-year-old daughter were ending. Other customers ducked for cover. An employee hit the emergency button. Someone called 911 Slap. "There's been a shooting at Slappy's car wash," the caller frantically told the dispatcher. "A man and a little girl. They're not moving." First responders arrived within minutes. Police officers immediately began administering life-saving measures, working desperately to save Ronnie and Armani. Their efforts were in vain. Both father and daughter were pronounced dead at the scene, still seated in their car, surrounded by shattered glass and evidence markers. The suspects had fled immediately after the shooting, driving away in the white Kia at high speed. They left behind not just 2 victims, but a crime scene that would shock even experienced law enforcement officers. A targeted execution that claimed not only its intended victim, but also an innocent child whose only mistake was being with her father at the wrong moment. As police secured the area with yellow tape, other customers and employees stood in shocked silence, trying to process how an ordinary trip to a car wash had transformed into a scene of senseless violence and profound loss. The Forest Hill Police Department immediately launched a full-scale investigation into the double homicide. Within hours, the car wash had been transformed from a crime scene into a hub of investigative activity. Forensic teams meticulously collected shell casings, analyzed blood spatter patterns, and processed fingerprints from surfaces around the scene. Detectives interviewed witnesses, many still visibly shaken by what they had observed. Security camera footage from the car wash proved crucial. Multiple angles captured the white Kia entering the property, the 2 suspects approaching Ronnie's vehicle, and the horrific shooting that followed. The clarity of these images allowed investigators to quickly identify the vehicle and begin tracking its movements through the city using additional traffic cameras and business surveillance systems.
At 10:40 in the morning, Forest Hill officers were dispatched to the 6500 block of Forest Hill Drive, reference the shooting. Our officers arrived and began life-saving measures, but both victims were pronounced dead at the scene. My first press release that I put out, I shared that we had identified a suspect vehicle. We had identified 2 suspects in the incident. And now we've identified the 2 cowards who took the lives of these innocent people. We have public enemy number 1, Adonis Robinson, who is also a registered sex offender. Public enemy number 2, Jacoby Russell, who's on the run. They're scared, they're cowards, they're hiding. We ask the public, please, you know where they're at? Let us know. This investigation started on Monday. The Texas Rangers have been our primary investigators. Our Forest Hill CID unit has been assisting. But I wouldn't be here standing today if it wasn't for the Fort Worth Police Department. I want to thank them because their efforts, their officers, their assistance has been instrumental from the minute the call came in. From the minute the call came in, they started working. They have not stopped.
By the following day, Police Chief David Hernandez announced they had identified the suspects as Adonis Robinson, 24, and Jacoby Russell, 21, both from nearby Fort Worth. Capital murder warrants were issued for both men, who remained at large despite an intensive manhunt spanning multiple jurisdictions. We are utilizing every resource available to locate these individuals, Chief Hernandez stated during a press conference. The brutal nature of this crime, particularly the murder of an innocent 5-year-old child, has our entire department working around the clock to bring the perpetrators to justice. The investigation faced significant challenges, particularly regarding motive. Unlike many homicides where the reason becomes quickly apparent, this case presented a puzzle. Ronnie Smith had no known criminal associations that would make him a target for such a calculated attack. His family insisted he wasn't involved in disputes or activities that would put him at risk. Detectives explored several possible angles. Was it related to Ronnie's music career? Had he unknowingly offended someone in the industry? Was there a personal conflict unknown to his family, or was this case of mistaken identity? Each possibility was methodically investigated as officers conducted interviews with Ronnie's friends, associates, and fellow musicians. What has your community done to address gun violence? Have you noticed changes in how public spaces handle security? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help others understand the impact of these tragedies and how we can work together to prevent them. As the investigation continued, the focus expanded beyond just identifying and apprehending the suspects. Detectives began mapping the suspects' movements before and after the shooting, analyzing their phone records, social media accounts, and known associates. A network began to emerge, potentially linking the suspects to other criminal activities in the area. The FBI joined the investigation, offering additional resources and expertise, particularly in tracking the suspects across state lines if necessary. Digital billboards throughout Texas displayed the suspects' photos and the description of their vehicle, while a tip line was established for anonymous information. Despite these efforts, questions remained. The calculated nature of the attack, the surveillance of the location, the timing, the number of shots fired, suggested planning and intent. Yet without the suspects in custody, the full story behind this tragedy remained elusive, leaving a community searching for answers and a family devastated by an incomprehensible loss. The murders of Ronnie Smith and his daughter Ramani sent shockwaves through Forest Hill and the surrounding communities. What began as local news quickly spread across Texas and then nationally. A father and his 5-year-old daughter gunned down in broad daylight at a car wash. The story touched a nerve, highlighting the random, unpredictable nature of gun violence and its capacity to claim the most innocent of victims. In the days following the shooting, a makeshift memorial appeared outside Slappy's Express car wash. Teddy bears, balloons, flowers, and handwritten notes accumulated, many addressed to Romani, expressing collective grief for a life barely begun before it was violently ended. Children's drawings appeared among the tributes, created by classmates who struggled to understand why their friend wouldn't be returning to school. "My nephew was a family man," Stella Houston told reporters, her voice breaking during a vigil held 3 days after the murders. "He loved his daughter more than anything in this world. They took not just one life but 2 generations of our family. For what? What could possibly justify this?" Her questions echoed those asked by countless community members, all searching for meaning in a seemingly senseless act. The management of Slappy's Express car wash announced the facility would remain closed for at least 2 days following the incident, partly to aid the investigation, but also as a mark of respect for the victims. When it reopened, many regular customers admitted feeling uneasy, looking over their shoulders as they went about the routine task that had proven fatal for Ronnie and Romani. Local schools brought in counselors to help children process the news, particularly those who knew Armani. Teachers reported difficult conversations with young students trying to comprehend why someone would hurt a child. Parents throughout the area described having painful discussions about safety with their children, many of whom now expressed fear about everyday activities. Fort Worth City Councilman Chris Nettles organized a community forum to address the tragedy and the broader issue of gun violence. "This isn't just about finding the perpetrators of this specific crime," he stated to a packed auditorium. "This is about addressing the conditions that make such violence possible in our communities. We cannot accept this as normal. We cannot become numb to these tragedies." The local music community rallied around Ronnie's family. Fellow artists organized benefit concerts to raise money for funeral expenses and to establish a memorial fund in Romani's name. Tributes appeared in songs and on social media, with many artists expressing not just grief, but fear. If this could happen to G Lil Ronnie, it could happen to any of them. Religious leaders from various faiths held prayer services and called for peace. "Violence begets violence," one pastor reminded his congregation. "We must break this cycle through love, through community, through opportunity, and through justice." As days turned into weeks, the community's initial shock evolved into a sustained demand for answers and action. Town halls focused on public safety drew record attendance. Neighborhood watch programs reported surges in volunteers. Community policing initiatives received renewed attention and funding. A tragedy had transformed into a catalyst for change, though for the family of Ronnie and Armani Smith, no amount of positive community response could fill the void left by their absence. The murders of Ronnie and Armani Smith represent more than an isolated tragedy. They exemplify a disturbing pattern of gun violence that continues to plague communities across America. In 2024, Texas recorded over 4,000 gun deaths, with approximately 45% classified as homicides. These statistics, however, fail to capture the human cost behind each number: families shattered, communities traumatized, and potential extinguished. What makes the Smith case particularly troubling is the calculated nature of the attack. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence, but a planned execution carried out in a public space with complete disregard for innocent bystanders. The willingness to murder a child alongside the intended target demonstrates a level of callousness that challenges our understanding of human behavior. Targeted attacks like this one often have complex origins. While investigators haven't confirmed a motive in the Smith case, similar incidents frequently stem from personal disputes, territorial conflicts, or retribution for perceived slights. In the music industry specifically, rivalries that begin as artistic competition can sometimes escalate into real-world violence, particularly in genres where authenticity and street credibility carry significant weight. The accessibility of firearms amplifies these conflicts. In Texas, where gun laws rank among the least restrictive in the nation, individuals with violent intentions can often obtain weapons with minimal obstacles. The suspects in this case fired between 20 and 30 shots in a public space, a level of firepower that transforms personal disputes into public safety crises. The impact of such violence extends far beyond the immediate victims. Each incident creates ripple effects throughout communities, particularly among children. Studies show that exposure to community violence, whether directly witnessed or experienced through proximity, can lead to post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression, and decreased academic performance among young people. In neighborhoods where gun violence is common, children often develop hypervigilance, constantly scanning their environment for threats instead of engaging fully in the normal activities of childhood. For communities of color which disproportionately bear the burden of gun violence, each incident reinforces trauma that spans generations. In predominantly black neighborhoods, like parts of Forest Hill, residents must navigate the dual challenges of grieving specific losses while managing the cumulative impact of recurring violence. This chronic stress contributes to health disparities and erodes community trust in institutions meant to ensure public safety. The economic costs are substantial as well. Beyond the immediate expenses of emergency response, investigation, and healthcare, gun violence depresses property values, discourages business investment, and diverts public resources from education and infrastructure to policing and criminal justice. One study estimated that gun violence costs the American economy approximately $557 billion annually, roughly 2.6% of the gross domestic product. Perhaps most troubling is the normalization of such violence. When incidents like the Smith murders briefly capture public attention before fading from headlines, they reinforce a dangerous acceptance of gun violence as an inevitable aspect of American life, rather than a preventable public health crisis. This normalization makes it increasingly difficult to generate the sustained political will necessary for meaningful change. The Smith case also highlights how gun violence creates a cycle of trauma and retribution. Without intervention, the murder of Ronnie and Romani could potentially trigger retaliatory violence, perpetuating a cycle that claims more victims and devastates more families. Breaking this cycle requires not just apprehending the perpetrators of specific crimes, but addressing the underlying factors that make violence seem like a viable option for resolving conflicts. The tragedy of Ronnie and Romani Smith demands more than grief and outrage. It calls for concrete action to prevent similar incidents in the future. Effective prevention requires a multifaceted approach that addresses the complex factors contributing to gun violence. Community engagement represents the foundation of any successful prevention strategy. When residents actively participate in safety initiatives, they create protective networks that can identify and address potential violence before it occurs. In Forest Hill and similar communities, this might include neighborhood watch programs, anonymous tip lines, and community forums where residents can share concerns with law enforcement without fear of retaliation. Violence prevention works best when it's driven by the community itself, explains Dr. Marlene Wong, a leading expert in trauma-informed approaches to violence prevention. External solutions imposed without local input rarely succeed. The people who live in affected neighborhoods understand the specific challenges they face and often have the most innovative ideas for addressing them. Mentorship programs have proven particularly effective in communities with high rates of gun violence. By connecting vulnerable young people with stable, positive role models, these programs provide alternatives to gang involvement and violent conflict resolution. Organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters report that mentored youth are 46% less likely to begin using illegal drugs, 27% less likely to begin using alcohol, and 52% less likely to skip school. All factors that reduce the risk of violent behavior. Mental health support systems play a crucial role in violence prevention. Access to counseling, trauma treatment, and crisis intervention can help individuals manage emotions and conflicts without resorting to violence. Unfortunately, many communities most affected by gun violence also face significant barriers to mental health care, including cost, stigma, and limited availability of culturally competent providers. We need to normalize seeking help for mental and emotional struggles, says Dr. Kevin Washington, a psychologist specializing in community trauma. Particularly in communities where traditional masculinity might discourage vulnerability, we must create spaces where people can process grief, anger, and trauma in healthy ways. Safe gun storage practices could prevent countless tragedies. Educational campaigns emphasizing secure storage of firearms, using gun safes, trigger locks, and separating ammunition from weapons can reduce both intentional violence and accidental shootings. Some communities have implemented free gun lock distribution programs, making safety devices available without judgment or registration requirements. Legislative approaches remain contentious but necessary components of comprehensive prevention. Evidence suggests that universal background checks, extreme risk protection orders, also known as red flag laws, and restrictions on high-capacity magazines can reduce gun violence without infringing on the rights of responsible gun owners. However, these measures require political will that often proves elusive in the aftermath of even the most heartbreaking tragedy. Education initiatives targeting conflict resolution skills show promise, particularly when implemented in schools and community centers. Programs teaching young people to manage disagreements through communication rather than confrontation help break cycles of violence before they begin. These skills prove especially valuable in environments where perceived disrespect often triggers violent responses. Technology offers innovative approaches to prevention and response. Acoustic gunshot detection systems can alert law enforcement to shootings in real time, reducing response times and potentially saving lives. Meanwhile, social media monitoring tools help identify brewing conflicts before they escalate to violence. Though these technologies raise important privacy concerns that communities must balance against safety benefits. Economic opportunity represents perhaps the most fundamental prevention strategy. Communities with living wage jobs, affordable housing, and educational pathways experience significantly lower rates of violence than those facing economic desperation. Investing in workforce development, small business support, and educational resources creates alternatives to illegal activities that often fuel violent conflicts. When people have something to lose, they make different choices, explains community organizer Marcus Johnson. Economic opportunity doesn't just reduce crime, it transforms communities by giving residents a stake in their collective future. No single approach can eliminate gun violence entirely, but implementing multiple strategies simultaneously creates a safety net that catches potential perpetrators before they commit acts of violence. The tragedy of Ronnie and Almani Smith reminds us that the cost of inaction is measured not in statistics, but in human lives. Lives that deserve protection through our collective commitment to prevention. The murders of Ronnie and Ronnie Smith serve as a painful reminder that violence can occur even during the most routine activities. While we cannot control the actions of others, we can adopt practices that may reduce our vulnerability and increase our chances of staying safe. Situational awareness represents the first line of personal defense. This doesn't mean living in constant fear, but rather maintaining a conscious awareness of your surroundings. Notice who enters and exits spaces you occupy. Identify potential exits when you enter unfamiliar locations. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. That uncomfortable feeling often stems from subconscious recognition of danger signals your conscious mind hasn't yet processed. Many people move through public spaces completely absorbed in their phones or lost in thought, explains personal safety instructor Maria Gonzalez. This creates vulnerability that potential attackers may exploit. Simply being visibly alert can deter those looking for easy targets. For parents, protecting children requires additional considerations. When possible, conduct errands like car washes, gas station visits, and ATM transactions without children present. If children must accompany you, choose businesses in well-trafficked areas during daylight hours. Position yourself between your child and potential threats, and teach age-appropriate awareness without creating unnecessary fear. Recognizing warning signs of potential violence can provide crucial moments to seek safety. These include escalating arguments, individuals displaying weapons, people appearing unusually agitated or under the influence of substances, and vehicles circling an area repeatedly without clear purpose. If you observe these indicators, distance yourself from the situation immediately and contact authorities if appropriate. Creating safety plans with family members establishes automatic responses during emergencies. These plans might include designated meeting points if separated, code words that signal danger, and practiced responses to various scenarios. For children, these plans should be presented as empowering rather than frightening, knowledge that helps them protect themselves rather than reasons to fear everyday activities. We practice fire drills without expecting our houses to burn down, notes child psychologist Dr. Aisha Thompson. Safety planning for potential violence should be approached with the same matter-of-fact attitude, not because danger is imminent, but because preparation reduces panic if an emergency occurs. Digital safety increasingly intersects with physical safety. Social media posts revealing your location, routine, or valuable possessions can provide targeting information to potential attackers. Consider adjusting privacy settings, limiting real-time location sharing, and being mindful of backgrounds in photos that might reveal your address or regular haunts. Community connection offers protection beyond individual vigilance. Knowing your neighbors creates a network of people who recognize when something seems amiss. Participating in community groups builds relationships that can provide warnings about local safety concerns. These connections transform isolated individuals into protected community members, watching out for one another. For those who have experienced or witnessed violence, accessing trauma resources is essential for long-term weather renaissance. Organizations like the National Center for Victims of Crime 1-800 FYI call provide support, counseling referrals, and practical assistance. Local victim advocacy programs often offer services regardless of whether an incident resulted in criminal charges or convictions. While these precautions cannot guarantee safety in a world where violence sometimes strikes randomly, they represent reasonable steps that balance protection with living fully. The goal isn't to respond to tragedies like the Smith murders with paralyzing fear, but rather with informed caution that acknowledges risks while refusing to surrender joy, connection, and normal activities to the threat of violence. As we consider these safety measures, we must also acknowledge a difficult truth. Ronnie Smith likely took many reasonable precautions, yet still fell victim to a targeted attack. This reality underscores that while personal safety practices matter, addressing the root causes of violence through community and policy approaches remains essential for creating truly safe communities where routine activities don't carry life-threatening risks. The story of Ronnie and Romany Smith forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about violence in our communities. A father and his 5-year-old daughter, going about an ordinary Monday morning, had their lives abruptly ended in an act of calculated violence. Their story is both unique in its specific tragedy and devastatingly familiar in a country where gun violence claims lives daily. What makes this case particularly heartbreaking is the innocence of Romany, a child who had just celebrated her 5th birthday, whose life consisted of kindergarten classes, playground visits, and the simple joys of childhood. She wasn't involved in conflicts or disputes. She had no enemies. She was simply with her father at the wrong moment, her future erased by bullets, meant for someone else. Her death represents the ultimate collateral damage in a culture where disputes too often end in gunfire. For Ronnie's family, the pain extends beyond grief into questions that may never find satisfying answers. Why was he targeted? Could anything have prevented this tragedy? How do they move forward with such a profound absence in their lives? The ripples of this violence will continue to affect them for generations, altering family gatherings, creating empty chairs at holiday tables, and leaving milestones uncelebrated. The Forest Hill community now faces its own challenges, addressing the trauma experienced by witnesses, restoring a sense of safety in public spaces, and preventing retaliatory violence that could claim more lives. Their response in the coming months will determine whether this tragedy becomes a catalyst for positive change or another painful memory that fades from public consciousness without creating meaningful impact. As viewers of this story, we have responsibilities as well. We can honor the memories of Ronnie and Armani by refusing to accept gun violence as inevitable. We can support organizations working to prevent violence in our communities. We can advocate for evidence-based policies that reduce access to weapons for those who pose dangers to others. We can build connections with our neighbors that create networks of safety and support. If this story has affected you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your engagement helps us continue sharing these important stories and providing analysis that goes beyond headlines to examine causes and prevention. Share this video with others who might benefit from understanding the reality of gun violence and the strategies that can help protect themselves and their loved ones. In the comments, I invite you to share your thoughts on how communities can better protect children from becoming victims of violence. Your insights might provide comfort or practical guidance to others navigating similar concerns. The tragedy of Ronnie and Romani Smith reminds us that behind every statistic about gun violence are real people with dreams, relationships, and futures that deserve protection. Their story deserves to be told, not just as a recounting of tragedy, but as a call to action. A reminder that the status quo is unacceptable when it means children can lose their lives during routine trips to car washes with their fathers. In our next episode, we'll examine how communities have successfully reduced violence through innovative programs that address root causes rather than just responding to incidents after they occur. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and remember that creating safer communities requires all of us working together.